We're going to cover the next control knob in this session, which is behavior or persuasion. This is the easiest control knob, right? Getting people to change their behavior is easy. It's actually arguably one of the hardest things to do. And what we're going to do today is cover some ways we can approach behavioral change. But first, so I just want to share with you some good news. Turns out that drinking coffee is good for your liver. So what did I do after I got this in 2014? I doubled my consumption of coffee. Behavior change is very easy. I don't know what's the problem. Then a year after, in 2015, New York Times, I love the New York Times, especially when they have good news. They said actually a glass of wine a day may help control type 2 diabetes. I'm a type 2 diabetic. So I doubled my consumption of wine. And of course, everything's better. So I don't know what the problem is. Behavior change is easy. You get the information, you act on it, right? Any problems there? A lot of problems. There is some bad news. We tend to respond well to news we like. For some reason, we don't respond as well for news we don't like. And that's going to be the heart of the policy problem. How to convince people to do the kinds of things that is not as easy as getting to drink more coffee or more wine. Going to the doctor to get checkups. Actually staying on your medicines. Maybe not smoking as much. Maybe driving better. Maybe eating better. There's a range of things that are incredibly important. Because one of the first things you learn when you work in the health sector is who is the front line for good health? It's us. We are the front line. Doctors can tell us, nurses can tell us, unless we actually do it, we don't get the full result. So that's going to be the focus of this session. The subtitle is Old Dogs and New Tricks. It's an expression. You cannot teach old dogs new tricks. It's not a true expression. My dog is 12 years old and she's teaching me new tricks all the time. So I'm going to spend a little time with you thinking about why is this relevant for universal health coverage for health sector reform. This shouldn't take that long. It should be second nature to you. It will go through a couple of conversations, one as a group and one around the table, just for you to concretize in your mind why this is important. Then I'm going to cover 5 very different approaches to behavior change. I'm going to talk about economic theory. I'm an economist. Economists, we have strong views about this. Half of it is correct, and half of it is absolutely wrong. There's an ecological approach. It's the approach that's taught in your schools of public health. So most of you have probably studied this. We're going to look at it and how different it is from economic theory. There's learning from marketing. So if we can convince people everywhere around the world to drink poison, that poison is called Coca-Cola, through marketing, can we use those techniques to get them to do something good? And that's the theory behind social marketing. What can we learn from commercial marketing? The most exciting part is the last 5 years there's been an explosion of new research on what's called new behavioral economics. It's new, it's behavioral, but it has absolutely nothing to do with economics. Its main finding is that economic assumptions are incorrect. But us economists, we like a good idea, we steal it and repackage it. It's actually psychology. Psychiatry, psychology, and even political science. And finally, I'm just going to give you a taste of something I found interesting. I'm addicted to computer games. I discovered this years ago. This is when I started my career as a teacher. This is a long time ago. PCs were just starting to become. I bought this Macintosh with floppy disks, and one of my students gave me a pirated copy of a Russian game called Tetris. Have you ever heard of Tetris? It's the silly blocks that keep falling and you have to rotate them, and in the background there's Russian music getting faster and faster. I became so addicted. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and play for 2-3 hours. I'd be giving a lecture and I didn't see anybody. I could see blocks falling and I could hear Russian music in the background getting faster and faster. I finally threw it away. So I don't play games, but I discovered there's a whole bunch of people who've learned that games have addictive behaviors. And can we learn from that? Can we learn what makes games addictive? Can we use that for good again? In the same way we learned from commercial marketing, if you can make people eat horrible McDonald's everywhere around the world, maybe you can use those kinds of tendencies to change. So those are the 5 things we're going to cover in this session. So I'm sure you're familiar with this chart by now, and we're now working on the last one, behavior. So for a minute, let's discuss. Can you think of examples where a household or individual behavior impacts access? Remember, access to services is one of the intermediate outcomes. Or the second question, can you think of examples where that impacts quality of the service? I understand there's only one functioning mic. So, oh, they work? Okay, good, good. So, any ideas, any suggestions as to what you think or thinks of examples that a household individual behavior impacts access to services? Please go ahead and use the mic, and then please go ahead after him and use the mic. Get it ready.
The tendency of an individual that he will get cured automatically. If I have a slight fever, I won't go to a medical doctor. I'll see that it can be reduced by taking a medicine or taking paracetamol or something else, or I'll wait for a day or two.
Oh, so delaying care. Okay. Do you want to give an example?
I was just going to give an example that it can be cultural. It can be, and so the example would be in many countries, I think, for example, dental procedures.
Oh, yeah.
You go to those, for example, in certain countries, you access them only when you have a need or you have a problem.
Right.
Whereas in a country like...
You do the preventive.
Like, yeah, in the United States, you do maintenance. You go every 6 months. It's kind of part of your routine rather than when you have an issue. So it's a cultural change.
And in the US, our dentists badger us to go.
That's right. So it's
you get text messages, you get emails, you get phone calls saying, you idiot, it's time for your checkup. Anyway, yes, sir. Use the mic so people can hear you. Oh, okay.
It was actually the same idea of our patient tends not to seek preventive cares, and that will impact their utilization.
Yeah, we had an experience when the church, some kinds of churches' influence had strong impact on anti-vaccination hysteria. So a lot of people were frightened to vaccinate their kids because in church they were told that it's dangerous.
Yeah. And it's not unique to churches, but that's an example of where a cultural belief leads to bad choices.
Maybe also in terms of biased providers, maybe they're culturally, for instance, in family planning, maybe they won't allow a unmarried woman to have access to family planning services, only married women.
Very good. So this behavior relates to the providers, which we didn't mention heavily, but that's also part of the equation. Because we talk about provider behavior and provider payment and organization, but this is true as well in terms of advising people. Cultural beliefs or biases may produce to providers providing inaccurate or incorrect or selective information. Yes, ma'am. Can you use the mic? It's front of you.
At a household level, I'm thinking of people living with HIV and highly stigmatized diseases, and have worked at a household level with those that have to conceal taking medicine and accessing care, especially if they're women. And then also working in a region where women can't always just automatically go to a provider, but need a male relative to go with them.
Absolutely. These are critical elements of behavior, gender-related, culture-related issues that we have to bring into the equation. So we all agree behavior matters and the drivers of behavior matter. So the next sort of group exercise I'd like you to do around your table, because this is something we're going to get back to at the end of the session. I would like you at your table to come up with one patient behavior, one provider behavior that you think is critical for achieving universal health coverage or for strengthening health systems. Pick it carefully, because at the end, you're going to use some of those tools to suggest policies to change it, right? So at each table, spend a couple of minutes, pick a behavior you want to influence, a behavior that you think is important for achieving universal health coverage or strengthening health systems. We're going to come back to it at the end and have you work on it once you've heard the rest of the lecture and got engaged. So take a couple of minutes, make a decision. I'll run very quickly to see which behaviors you've selected. All right. So I'm going to ask this gender insensitive table to tell me what is their one behavior they want to focus on. Have you come up with a conclusion? Okay. Any ideas you've thrown in that's of interest?
Prevention.
Prevention of what?
So we want to, in Lebanon's case at least, we want to promote demand for preventive services. People usually go when they're sick.
Familiar with that culture and that concept? Yes.
In Kosovo, we would change communication skills with the provider. We have trouble. Yeah, sport providers.
Any example why that's an issue?
No, it's an issue because usually most of the survey that we've done with our patients, they were not happy how the provider was approached to them. And
Listen to your patients. I'm impressed. That's great. One more table wants to give me a behavior they're thinking about. Yeah.
For
Design that can only talk to the front table.
yeah, for the patient, we were thinking of self-medication as a behavior.
Self-medication.
Yeah.
Not always a good thing.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So those are some examples. Keep in mind, we're going to come back to this at the end of the session, and you're going to work on changing. It's another table with no men. Just realizing there's a lot of tables with no men here, Nadim. Why do you do that? So let's start with the first theory. Since I'm an economist, I put economics first. Economic theory, for over a couple of hundred years, economists have said at the heart of our sector, of our field, our knowledge area, our social science, is that people are rational. That assumption, that statement, is at the heart of economic theory. Individuals make decisions to maximize their satisfaction, their utility, subject to a budget. Firms make decisions to maximize profits, subject to their budget and market conditions. And that's the heart of economic theory. If that's the case, then two things matter. One, prices matter. And we have incredible evidence that prices do matter. What you pay makes a difference. So one of the most cost-effective interventions for cessation of smoking is taxation. What does taxation do? It makes cigarettes more expensive. It changes the price. There's a lot of theory about transaction cost. Economies that do incredibly well are economies where the transaction costs are very small. That's why there's a bank does something called the doing business. They look at how easy it is to set up a company, how easy it is to start up a company, how easy it is to get credit, to buy things, how easy it is to manage the regulatory framework. And those are all costs. So there's a lot of good evidence. Provider payment, which you've covered in this course, are about prices and how you pay and what you pay matters. So there's a lot of good evidence for this part of economics to be correct. Unfortunately, the second part of economics, which is flowing from this idea that people are rational, is that information matters. So as a consumer, if you tell me what the prices are and you give me the correct information, I should consistently make the right choice. The evidence here is not as good. And this is not just economists saying it, public health specialists have said it for years now. Putting information doesn't always give you the right results. It doesn't mean you should give people wrong information. Just we need to accept the fact that information in of itself may not be enough to get behavior change. And we're going to get back a lot on that when we talk about the new behavioral economics. The ecological approach, I'm not going to spend any time on this one. This is what we're all taught in schools of public health. If you go into medicine, if you go into public health, even economists are taught this stuff. It's basically everything matters. Friends matter, family members matter, health personnel matters, policies, research, peer reviews, community. And you need to work at each level. They influence each other. Imagine being somebody in the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Health comes and tells you everything matters. What's your first instinct? It was lovely talking to you. Thank you very much. Goodbye. I'll see you next year at the budget discussions. That's a problem with an approach, a realistic approach that says many things matter. It's the opposite of economics. Economics tells you a couple of things work. The ecological approach says you have to work at every single level. And that's the second approach we tend to work on. Now, learning from marketing. We said earlier that every village in every part of the world, you will find Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Not because of their fantastic taste or their health benefit. They're pretty much sugar water. In many ways, they have contributed to obesity. They've contributed to diabetes rates around the world. but they have been marketed like crazy. So can we learn? Can we learn in health? And this is something 15 years ago was the rage. And a lot of evidence has existed that you can actually make a difference if you use the techniques that were successful for commercial marketing. And it always starts with doing research with consumers. What is it that consumers want? And then what are known as the 4 Ps: attractive products, affordable prices, convenient placement, and promotion. I'm going to give you an example from my country. I was teaching this course years ago in Beirut, in Lebanon. And we had people who work in the ministry, is it Ministry of, what is the ministry called? Is it Public Health or Ministry of Public Health? They said, oh, we had just started this campaign on screening for breast cancer. And they started showing me some of what they have. So I'm just going to give you some slides from what they tried to do, because I realized they're following a lot of the techniques that are taught in social marketing. And in the case of Lebanon, it's also using public-private partnership. Because if you know anything about Lebanon, it's very entrepreneurial. There's a huge private sector, they're very active, and they, in this case, wanted to be part of the solution. So a lot of time was spent on trying to develop a logo, and a lot of the research said, focus on saving lives. But there's some lovely things. It's hard to read this in Arabic. It says, say no to breast cancer, but the no is written in the same way as the ribbon in the pink ribbon for breast cancer. So it's in Arabic, it fit nicely. What I found interesting is also they used their research to try to correct inaccuracies in people's knowledge. So there was a lot of evidence that women thought that cancer only comes to women who have large breasts, that women who have small breasts do not have as much of a risk. But Lebanon is a relatively conservative society, so they cannot show pictures of women and breasts. But Lebanon loves fruits. So what did they do? They showed you 2 sets of fruits of different sizes, and they said, breast cancer, we are all at risk. It's a lovely, thoughtful way to send a message. It's not the size of the fruit or the size of the breast that matters. It's the fact that we are all at risk. So it's a smart, strategic way to get information without beating people over the head. One of my favorite is this picture. And it's, again, a play on Arabic words. So the X-ray that you need for the mammogram, in Arabic, it plays on the word picture. It's an X-ray picture. So this one says, remember to get the X-ray picture so you can stay in the picture. And you see the woman's picture disappearing. This is the kind of stuff that only people who know how to do marketing can help you with. And I mean, to me, it was fun. They did many other things. Unfortunately, I cannot show you most of it, but it's an interesting attempt. I was disappointed to find out this morning it didn't work that great. They still have a problem. It probably improved. They did many other things. They also brought in research, did the homework by leading academicians. They did campaigns to identify the bottlenecks, engaged a huge marketing. Lebanon has an amazing marketing segment. It's the dominant marketing group for the Middle East, actually. Advertisement placements all over. Discounted mammograms. I'm told now it's free for certain populations. So they're basically trying their best to minimize the price, the cost of getting it done. Strong financial support from Big Pharma and working across different ministries. It's just an example of how you can be creative to get it going. Do you want to say something else about the experience in Lebanon? You don't have to, I'm just thinking. We can come back to you later if you want. Very good. So, we've covered 3 approaches fairly quickly. First approach, economics. Prices matter, we know they do. So can we bring prices of things down? Should we be charging user fees for preventive care, for example? Should we be charging user fees for services that are critical for the population? But we learned from economic theory that the evidence is not that strong on information. From ecological, we recognized that this is an intricate set of relationships that require working across multiple domains. From social marketing, we learned how to start using commercial marketing techniques. The sexy stuff the last 5 years is this new behavioral economics. And it starts introducing new terms. Irrational behavior. So the minute you see that, you know this is not economics anymore. Because the main assumption of economics is rational behavior. But lo and behold, we've accepted the fact that for certain sets of behaviors, we don't always do the right thing. When I was doing my PhD, there were people writing their PhD on rational addiction. That's how sick we are as a profession. They took the most irrational thing in the world, which is addiction to drugs, and they tried to say there's a rational reason why people do this. So this whole idea of thinking beyond rationality is incredibly important. But we come up with some interesting terms. Path of least resistance, and I'm going to see examples of that. Defaults, convenience manipulation, and asymmetric paternalism. I'm going to give you specific examples of what these things mean, but this is a new world for economics. And it's an important world for you to think about as you think about changing behavior. So again, the traditional economic theory is that you worry about prices and information, and that will give you the right tools for policy. Behavioral economics says, no, people make mistakes in their decision. And they don't always know what's best for them. And sometimes even if they do know, they can't or don't do it. Very different way of thinking about policy. So, the 3 insights I want you to think about. And we'll give you specific examples which hopefully will convince you of this. Humans make a lot of mistakes and have biases about automatic thinking, or what the word that I really love is inertia. How to get people out of their comfort zone. Information is not enough. And the third, which I think is very important, people are social. And you have to keep that in mind. If you want to motivate them to behave differently, you have to find a way to make that behavior be part of fitting into a larger social construct. But trust me, the first one is the most important. So this chart completely changed my thinking. This is when I stopped being a standard economist. This was given at a lecture at the main complex. We're going to go get a picture at lunch. Fantastic economist put that slide up and said, this is organ donation in Europe. In Europe at that time, there were 2 elements of Europe. Denmark, Netherlands, UK, Germany. Very few people were registered organ donors. What's an organ donor? When you're hit by a car, your organs are given to those who need it, harvested and used. But in Austria, Belgium, France, Hungary, Poland, Portugal, 99% of the population are organ donors. So why in the world would Germany and Austria, 2 neighboring countries, share a language, share a culture, share a history, have 12% and 99.98%? And the reason is very simple. Incredible laziness. Inertia. The main difference is that some countries, the one in yellow, to become an organ donor, you actually have to take one step. You have to go someplace and register as an organ donor. For the countries in blue, you are born an organ donor. In order to not be an organ donor, you have to take one extra step. You have to go someplace and deregister. If that doesn't give you a sense of the importance of inertia and laziness, nothing will. There's no reason in the world that 99% of one country want to be organ donors, or only 12% of a neighboring country want to be organ donors. The main difference is path of least resistance. Laziness. That's an insight that just woke me up. I realized, wow. How can we make sure that the defaults are the right defaults? And it's not just in organ donation and in health. It's in everything we do. When I entered the World Bank, I was a young man. And the World Bank, first week in orientation, forced me to make a lot of decisions about my retirement. I had to pick certain things about how money will be invested for my retirement. Guess what I did at that time? I didn't do any of it. I didn't do the stuff I needed to do about life insurance, which would have made sense to do it back then. I didn't do what I needed to do about how much money I wanted to put. I had no clue, and I had no interest. Years later, they reached out to me again. They said, there's this new program. I want you to invest. But they did something really stupid. They gave me options. They said, you have to do this, or you can do this, or you can do this, or you can do this. I said, tomorrow I'm going to Ukraine. I'll think about it when I come back. I never did. So the evidence on investment and on pensions and on retirement, the way to do it, what's called asymmetric paternalism, is you don't give people choices. You register them and say, you have a year to change your choice. Guess what people do? They don't change their choice, but at least they've made the right investments, or at least potentially socially optimal investments. This default thing is powerful, and it's something we can use. So I'm going to give you a specific example. The same lecturer who showed that chart, the second author on this paper, gave this example about nutrition. And his argument was quite compelling. Basically, the US is going down a really bad road when it comes to nutrition. Not malnutrition, overnutrition. And it's been going on for a long time. So, people are eating less at home, and they're eating more and more away from home. And when they eat away from home, they eat a lot of bad food. And that has resulted in increasing numbers of obesity, incredible rates of very large body mass index. Not a good thing. So, the answer, of course, was information. Remember we said it's mixed? So, the US introduced a major Labeling and Education Act. They then provided web-based information. In some cities, they forced restaurants to publish the calories and everything you need to do on that. So that's the answer, right? That's the economic answer. People read, they process, and they act. And the findings was not so good. Obesity rates did not drop. It had very little effect on the trajectory of the obesity rate. And in fact, new things like low-fat labeling add to people, and I did it myself. For a while, I fell in love with these low-fat muffins. It's like, I'm eating low-fat muffins. That's good. The fact that I was eating 2 or 3 of them a day was not that good. Yeah, it's low fat, but it's high on many other things, like calories. Also, there's research about people saying, what the heck? Heck is a politically correct word. There's a different word that's used. Behavior. So they wanted to do a study to say, can we do something other than information? And can we show that we can use this new behavioral economics insight, to change behavior about consumption of calories? And they designed this 2x2x3 design around Subway stores. Do you know what Subway sandwich stores are? So these are fantastic fast food options. The reason it's fantastic is that you have the ability to put together an incredibly healthy sandwich or an incredibly unhealthy sandwich. And it's your power to do it. So they wanted to test out different approaches. One was to do calorie recommendations. One is to provide calorie information. And the third, manipulate. Use pure manipulation, relying on this idea that we're really not that smart on these things, and that you can trigger behavior by manipulating us. I can tell you, you know what the findings are, right? But let's see it. So, information, no main effects on calories. But they did find statistically significant information that calorie information worked on the dieters, but not in the right way. What they found is for people who are not dieting, giving them information about calories led to them eating less, which then gives you this amazing findings that for people like me who needed to diet or claimed that they were dieting, when you gave them the information, what happened? They actually ate more. That's why they canceled each other. That's why overall, information didn't matter, but it was worse than it not mattering. It only mattered in a positive way to those who didn't need it, and it impacted in a negative way for those that needed it, which is just mind-blowing. Somehow, not only are we not smart, we're really not smart. And what was interesting, and that one blew my mind, the impact is that for people who are dieting, our ability to accurately do the math decreased with the information. So part of the survey when you exit is you say, what did you buy? So you enter the Subway store. Before you enter, they tell you, we'll give you the food for free, but on your way out, you have to tell us what you did. So here's a coupon. So for 1/3, they said, we'll give you information. For a third, they gave them recommendation. I'm not going to mention the third, and I'll mention it in a minute. But on the way out, you have to answer a few questions. So one of the questions asked is, how much did you eat? What was interesting for dieters, when they were asked how much calories they consumed, they actually underestimated how much they ate, based entirely on them being provided the information. Wow. You know how many years I spent writing journals of how much food I ate? I've been overweight all my life. And realizing how I must have lied to myself, or somehow forgotten that bunch of French fries I ate on the way from work. It is amazing when you start looking at your brain and realize how much your brain doesn't always function the right way. And this was just really interesting. So, the third experiment was convenience manipulation. What they did, and you'll see 3 pictures. Each picture is what was on the top of the menu for 1/3 of the group. So 1/3 of the group were given a menu where the top picture had the lowest calories. Just the top picture. Everything else was the same. For another third, it was mixed. Half high calories, half low calories. For the third, It was only the high-calorie sandwiches on the top of the menu. So that's the manipulation. They changed what's the front page of the menu. Can you guess what the results were? The calories consumed were highly correlated with what was the first page on the menu. So those that received the menu that had the low calories as the front picked from those sandwiches. Those that received a mixed picked the mixed one, and those that received the one with the highest calories on top picked the highest calories. It's amazing how our brain doesn't work. And this is not unique to this experiment. They've done a lot of work in high school cafeterias. In the US, you enter, you take your tray, and you go through a cafeteria to get your food. What they did is they manipulated what they put first in the line. And again, the findings were amazing. If at the front of the line and easiest to reach were the salads and the healthy foods, you ate much more of that. But if you started it with the desserts and the high-calorie foods, people consumed a lot more food. Can you say we are lazy? It is amazing, the evidence on this stuff. So information did not influence overweight people. In fact, it hurt them, and convenience manipulation had a large impact, and a positive one. There's some examples happening around the world. I just wanted to flash to you something happening in Chile, which they've decided to do the labeling, but do much more than just the labeling. So they have a labeling strategy. You have to say that something is high calorie, high saturated fat, high sugar, to signal to people, not just numbers telling them, this is bad for you, but they do a lot more. They recognize that the food industry is targeting kids, so get rid of things like Tony the Tiger, which is promotional techniques to get kids to eat sugary cereals. No advertising on television or websites that are aimed at children, and limit availability of unhealthy food at preschool and school setting. So they are still trying to do the labeling, but they're not stopping at the labeling. They're doing a lot more than that. This is something that came out recently, which I found interesting. It's a simple way to remember, and you have it in your slides. It's basically the EAST principle: make it easy, make it attractive, make it social, make it timely. So as you're designing your policies, recognize that these are 4 biases we are struggling with. If it's hard to do, we don't do it. We're lazy. So make it easy. Make the good choice easy. Make it attractive. Find ways to get us to be attracted to the right option. Make it social. I'll tell you the story about the social. There's a unit in the UK that does a lot of work to manipulate people to do the right thing. And they've tested a whole bunch of theories. So there was an attempt for a while in the UK to get people to insulate their homes so they can protect the energy usage, environmentally friendly. So they send these letters. They tested something. They added a couple of words in the letter. And those couple of words would say, somehow, most of your neighbors have already done this. So they would send the letter with that and without that. Guess which ones were more effective? It's the ones that added a few words. It's just a little bit extra ink, right? That says, because we're social. We don't want the neighbors to be ahead of us. We want to be part of the movement. And if our neighbors are doing it, we should be doing it as well. So those are relatively simple things. Again, this is not unique to health. This is the kind of behavior that cuts across multiple sectors. But health is really something we can do much more of than what we have been doing. Timeliness is incredibly important in health. So it's an important thing to also look at. Any questions so far? Are you happy about the fact that we're not the smartest people on earth? It was an interesting realization for me. I've always thought of myself as reasonably smart until I started reading that stuff and realized, maybe my wife was right. I'm not as sharp as I thought I was. Learning from games. I told you earlier about my addiction to games. So the examples I'm going to give you are examples I have not tried. Because ever since my early career, I've realized if I played computer games, I will never account to anything in life. I will never get to anything. I will not travel the world. I will not do what I've been done. So I have not played a computer game ever since. But there's a lot of interesting literature about the ways we get people to go back to games and how we are manipulated to keep coming back and back and back to game. It's important because it gives you insight to this irrational behavior that we just spoke about. Because can we use the same tricks to get people to do the right thing? Maybe about staying on their medicines, maybe about getting their checkups. So we're going to talk about 4 dynamics: the appointment dynamic, the influence and status dynamic, progression, and communal discovery. So the appointment dynamic is to succeed, you must return to a predetermined time to perform a specific predetermined action. The most famous game for that, and I have never played it, is a Facebook game called Farmville. How many of you have played Farmville, or at least know about it? So it's a game early on in Facebook days where you basically have to go in every certain number of hours to water the plants. If you don't water the plants, they die. The fact that these are not real plants is another story, but you get into this habit, and people got addicted to this silly, silly concept of going back and watering the plants. Because it's a time, it's a predetermined action, I want to do it, I want my plants to survive. Strange. Thank God I never played it. There was a joke that you could stop word productivity if you make it every 2 hours people have to water the plants, because people will not get enough sleep. The example of that you see in terms of commercial is happy hour. Going to a bar and you know on Friday at a certain time the drinks are discounted by $1. Oh yes. And women get the drinks for free or half price. So lovely women are going to go to the bar and I'm going to go to the bar. And you sort of get into the habit of, becoming an alcoholic by going to a certain time every. The other is social pressure status for behavior change dynamic. And the game there, again, I have never played it. It's called Modern Warfare. Has anybody played Modern Warfare? Be honest. Wow. So these are old. I need to come up with new games then. So Modern Warfare, you get to level up. So the more you play, the more you get into these fights, and the more you succeed in these fights, you get to the next level and the next level. And people love to keep leveling up. And that gets you back into the game again and again and again. Of course, we're all familiar with credit cards. American Express is famous for their levels. You start with the lowly green, then you graduate to silver, and then you become gold, and then you become black. The fact that it's the same credit card, it's used the same everywhere, is not the point. The point, it gives you status. I now have a gold card. Ooh, I have a black card. The fact that you're paying a lot more for these color-coded cards is part of why they like doing it. But we end up following that leveling up need to do. Schools are starting to move away from grading to leveling up. There's a fantastic thing called the Khan Academy. I don't know if you're familiar with it, which gets people to level up, get to certain knowledge, and then jump to the next level versus getting grades. And it seems to have had an effect on children's educational attainment push. The third is progression dynamic. So you have granular small steps that get you to complete itemized tasks. This one affects me quite a bit. I love this itemization thing. I love these check boxes and finishing this. I mean, I love that stuff. I'm addicted to it. So the game is called World of Warcraft. And again, you progress by finishing a set of itemized tasks. You do this, you do this, you do this, and you keep going up. LinkedIn, have any of you are on LinkedIn? So LinkedIn has this cool trick. When you do your CV, it gives you this bar that says your CV is only 70% completed. And if you're somebody like me, you can't sleep. Why 70% only? Why am I not 99.98%? It's the kind of stuff you get manipulated with, this itemized set of, and you say, okay, what did I miss? Oh, I didn't do all my education level. Oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. It's a very interesting way we get manipulated. The famous commercial application on that is the punch cards at coffee shops. And you go to coffee shops, you get this punch card, and you collect these cards, and you rarely end up using them, but you're always trying to collect them so you can get a full amount. You spend a lot more money to think you're saving money. Usually you don't. And finally, communal discovery, where you get the whole community working together to achieve an objective. Again, this is playing on the social part. Web-based ratings. How many of you rate restaurants and movies? And I love that stuff. And it gets me to do a lot more of those things. So anyway, these are some examples of... So we're going to finish by you now taking 5 or 8 minutes to go back to the table exercise we started with. Pick a behavior, pick one. For households or for providers. I think you guys picked a provider behavior. And be creative. How would you use parts of these 5 different approaches to develop policies to change that behavior? And then we're going to ask a couple of tables to present. Just a quick change of plan. The picture is not going to be after this session. It's going to be after the next session. So don't run out and brush your hair and get ready. Wait till after the next session. All right. So any of the tables in the back want to volunteer their ideas? Let me give the tables in the back first, and I'll go to the front tables because we heard from these tables first. Any of the tables in the back want to give us their ideas? Okay, go for it. It doesn't work?
So our problem...
Please listen to your colleague.
Our problem was how to instant communication.
Please listen to your colleague.
Yeah.
Yes.
Our issue was about enhancing communication skills of our providers toward the patients, and we thought that their behavior will change if we do some of the things that, like tandem consultation, it's called patient and the doctor, provider, so people observe, and then in the end of the sessions they organize together where it will fade. We have also role play with a bad scenario, so to show them, how it changed. And also we can organize the video recording sessions with patients and a doctor. So afterward, we can put on the recording and analyze, and even the doctor can see by himself where he made the mistakes, because some...
The providers in the
Yes. patients, and also the pros and cons. Yes, because lots of time we don't see each other. We think that we are the best on this. So I mean, these three ideas helped a lot, and we've started to implement in something, and people start to change a little bit when they see each other, how they behave, when they see themselves. Yeah.
When I was becoming a speaker for the bank, they put me through communication training. And one of the most painful thing in the world was they videotaped my presentation and they showed it to me and started showing me the kinds of stuff I was doing incorrectly. That was quite painful, but it was actually quite illuminating. It gets you to, yeah, very good. Thank you. Anybody, any other table? How about table back there? What was your choice? What did you do about it?
Well, we talked about or tried to find a solution regarding immunization and convincing populations to accept immunization, and we talked about examples from India and also Pakistan, in which famous cricket players are put on advertisements on TV. Being examples, so to say, for people who then might follow this example and accept immunization without probably fully understanding the biology behind it.
And in places where there are these powerful communicators, such as cricket players, that makes a lot of sense. Yes?
Yeah, just to add, we focus very much on the demand side, but we also mentioned what they're doing in many Latin American countries, where people who are part of the social cash transfer programs, participation or payout of cash transfers may be made conditional on going for well-child checkups, having your kids vaccinated, and so forth. We didn't talk so much about the supply side and what can be done to incentivize providers to
so going with straight economic theory, reverse the price instead of them having to pay them to do that. This table, any ideas, any suggestions?
We discussed about antenatal care, and we think to use text messages to remind the mothers.
Using technology, text messages to remind women or families about the need to do that.
They need to do that in the next round.
Next round. So once it's about doing the continuity part. So once you have them in once, you can reach them through technology. Very good. This actually works nicely for medicines as well. I get my text messages all the time about coming to get the next round. Yes?
Also, one company which was selling tires during the winter, they were doing advertising through the SMSs. So they were reminding people that you need to change the tires and everything. So sales increased for more than 300% just by single move with the advertising, sending SMS to people.
This is a win-win for the tire companies and for public health, because you're likely to have better wheels to the nice accident. Any other thoughts? These tables, anybody? Yes, Asel?
Okay, we have chosen to change behavior of the provider at the PHC level, but then when we had our internal discussion, we kind of were going through the process of reflection on what we have done under the RBF at the hospital level, because we have observed change in the behavior, so trying to understand what has worked. So what has worked is a change of the incentive from penalties towards rewards, and that has worked. And then, price, economic theory. And then second thing which has worked is just like information available publicly, so that hospitals which did better kind of were monitoring which hospitals were in the first, 3, 4, 5 places, but poorly performing hospitals did not care much. So that is the thing. And then we realized that some of the things which you told us in the presentation Innovative things we did not use. So we were mainly on economical theory. But now we could not come up with the ideas. Yeah, we need to think through and maybe come up with something for PHC.
Very good. Thank you. So again, we're not solving all these issues in one 80-minute session. The idea was to just give you a sense of the world out there, what we're learning, and hopefully suggest you bring in a different set of skills into this conversation. So the big message to me when I learned about all this stuff is said, okay, an economist and a public health specialist, which tend to be the people I worked with, may not be the only skills I need. Maybe I need to talk to psychologists. Maybe I need to talk to people who know how to do marketing. Maybe I need to engage into the conversation the kinds of expertise that doesn't necessarily reside in my own education or education of my colleagues. That's one of the things I loved about the Lebanon example, though I'm disappointed it wasn't as effective as we had hoped, is that they went out to the commercial marketers and they reached out and said, okay, help us do this. How do we change the think about it? Very good. So just some quick sort of take-home messages. Ignoring behavior change, really, we do that at our own risk. We do that at our own risk individuals, but also as public policy experts. Worrying about financing is good. Worrying about organizational reform is good. Recognizing that provider payments matter is good. Understanding that all of this is a political issue, that you need to also worry about the politics of it. Looking at regulation and different tools, all are good. But so is also recognizing that a big part of this equation is changing behavior. Not an easy, but an important part of it. We have different disciplines that tell us how to do it. None of them are perfect. Economics is good about the prices. It's terrible about information. But we're getting much more knowledge. And that's something that has changed me as a health specialist or a health economist, is I started reading a lot more about what we're learning from behavioral economics. There's new evidence that's growing, and we need to engage and use it to move into the next domain. I just wanted to leave you with a couple of resources. This one breaks my heart. It's a fantastic book put together by the bank a few years ago. There's a chapter in it by an ex-colleague of ours who unfortunately passed away this year, a young woman with amazing skill set. Used to teach at the course. Her name is Aka Pandey. Wrote a wonderful chapter summarizing all available literature about what has worked and what has not worked in behavior change using non-economic tools. I highly recommend it. It's downloadable, it's free, and it has a lot of knowledge that I think is incredibly useful. And finally, a few years ago, the World Bank put together a whole world development report about this whole idea of behavioral economics called Mind, Society, and Behavior. So World Development Report 2015, also available for free in multiple languages, and you have access to it. With that, I'm telling you I'm done with this course. I get on an airplane tomorrow, I'll go to Europe. And thank you very much for being, and I hope you enjoy the last day and a half.